There's questioning of the system. There's questioning of the status quo. And I want to be part of that. That's the doc that knew the whole family that you could call right away. That's the doc that would sometimes give you exercise as a prescription or eat this, don't eat that. The longer people stay on the metabolic pathway and have this high protein diet, the better they get. I used to be vegetarian. That's the dark secret. I used to be vegetarian for many years. And I think that was one of the most unhealthiest things I ever done to myself. And I do feel that if we were to feed our population in a different way, all this diagnosis of anxiety and depression, all of that, we probably could make it, most of it go away. I have people who say, no, you know what? I would rather have a surgery. If you want to stop the medications, the way I look at it is first, you want to eliminate the need for the medications before you stop them.
So I've got with us today, my pleasure to bring Dr. Camilla Petersen, who is a physician up in Montana, Missoula, and also is one of our Revero physicians. So thanks for doing this. Appreciate this. No, I mentioned the Missoula Maggot Fest. There's a rugby team called the Missoula Maggots.
Yes.
Way back in the day when I played rugby, I was living in Wyoming and went up to Missoula, to the Missoula Maggot Fest to participate. So interesting. I guess we'll get started with your background. What drove you into medicine to start with? I'm just curious about that.
That's a long-winded story. I don't know if we have enough time, but I started out as a midwife and naturopathic physician, and I was pretty much mentored into that profession. To cut it shorter, I ended up doing a lot of public health, and I worked internationally. And because I became really interested in public health and I wanted to do more policy, somehow I decided to apply to my second school, and I applied to medical school, primarily with the reason of doing remote area medical work, public health and public policy, and maybe doing some kind of war zone medicine, really remote area medicine. And because I was already older and I was a non-traditional student to begin with, again, I was mentored and I was recommended to apply. And I applied to a Caribbean medical school, which seemed like a good idea at the time. And I applied to one school only, and it was a do or die. If I get in and I go and I commit the next 7 years of my life to medical schooling and education. So I got in, and because I was in a really remote area, I was on a 5 square mile island. I ended up having my own little practice. I got to know the community. I got to really appreciate what it means to be a doc in a small rural place again. And I really loved it. And I decided to become more of a family medicine doctor. I also met a guy, as we all do in those situations, and got engaged. And I took this man who spent the last 10 years in the Caribbean to Alaska to train as a rural family medicine physician. And that's what I did. So I became a rural trained family medicine physician, and I did remote area work in Alaska and then New Zealand and then back in Alaska. And then we decided to, as we were having our family, and decided to settle somewhere. My husband had enough of the cold, wet summer. So we moved to Missoula, Montana. And in Missoula, Montana, at that time, I came full circle. I became much more interested in policy. I was already a full spectrum family doc. I was on call all the time and delivering babies and doing A to Z, full spectrum kind of unicorn of healthcare. I was the old fashioned doc. I did everything, delivered babies, hospice, everything in between for everybody. And I thought that I would have a better schedule to be a mom. And I wanted to do more policy and administrative work. So I became a hospitalist and worked in a bigger hospital system and became a medical director and did all the things that you do in a bigger medical system. And over the last few years, there's this little thing called COVID that brought forward how big and unyielding the system can really be. And I opened my own practice. And I opened my own practice because I got kind of disenchanted with the way of the medicine was going. And we were missing the key piece of human-doctor relationship. And we were really I didn't want to be in the machine. I didn't want to just keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So I opened a kind of hyper-personalized primary care concierge medical practice in Missoula, Montana. And originally I wanted to do really high-end primary care and do wraparound care and do everything I could for my patients, which is where it started. I brought all the advanced testing that existed, the best in the world, to this little place in Missoula, Montana. And when you have a lot of data, and I started doing, of course, wearables and longevity, focused care. And once you do all of that, I was already on a personal level interested in nutrition. I was doing nutrition myself for years and decades, starting as a naturopath. But it really brought forward when you have a lot of testing, you do a lot of detailed analysis. And when when you're asking the question, and now you have the answers in terms of diagnostics, people wanted to know, what do you do about it? What do you really do? And what can I do? And I had a very motivated patients. So take this pill and see me next year was not good enough. And because that wasn't good enough, I became really primarily interested in metabolic health. It seemed like a natural segue because I was already doing it myself. And then I saw amazing, amazing results. I was reading your books. I was reading Paul Saladino. I read a lot of other books. I started by reading take-holes just like yourself and really digging into the studies. Then I read the books about the books and the studies that were mentioned in every book and started doing my own research. And it's put me on a journey where now I'm primarily a metabolically focused practice. I incorporate diet and low-carb lifestyles significantly into my treatment plans, and I see results that I have never seen, even as a naturopath, as an integrative practitioner, as a rural doc.
Yeah, that is a really eye-opening thing when you start seeing this, what you would consider almost miraculous results compared to what the sort of the standard of the care. And you mentioned the system just drives you through these algorithms where it's just like you just do this for every patient and you get the sort of modest results at best. And sometimes you're just disease managing people, which is, I think, a shame that we've come to that. Let me ask a quick question because you said something. You lived in New Zealand for a while. Where in New Zealand were you located?
I was in Tappary, New Zealand. If you look on a map of New Zealand, and you look as far south in New Zealand as you can possibly go in the world, that's where I was, a little nowhere point.
So you were near that. You were almost at the South Pole, basically. Did you ever get down to the South Pole while you were there?
Yeah, it was 90K from Invercargill in a really remote area, like Western Southland. I know you spent some time in New Zealand. You're familiar. Mm-hmm. And yeah. I was in New Zealand. And of course, I spent a few years in New Zealand. So you have to be a rugby fan if you're in New Zealand.
That's true. I was there to play rugby. I lived on the North Island. I lived in Cambridge, which is about an hour and a half south of Auckland. So different part of the world, but very interesting. One of the things that you'd mentioned was the focus on metabolic health is obviously what we do at Revero. It's part of the process there. And I'm just wondering what made you attracted to our company? Because it's obviously you can do what you're doing where you're at without that. But what made you want to work with us?
Mostly because I wanted to move the needle in general perception. I was always interested in healthcare and policy, and I wanted to make a bigger change. And I really feel that medicine has come to a point where the market has to be disrupted. And Revero is taking it and scaling it. And I wanted to be part of the company, and especially because Revero was in early stages. I want to be part of the company and be able to be part of the solution instead of just looking from the sidelines. And because Revero is something that can be scaled and attracts a wider audience, then you can scale and move the needle on the general perception of metabolic health is. Right now, as part of Revero, I'm talking to a lot of patients and I'm seeing people talking about it in a different sense. Like I'm seeing there is a population-based interest in metabolic health and nutrition and food. There's questioning of the system. There's questioning of the status quo. And I want to be part of that. I want to be a part of that because really, if we look deep inside, and part of what the premise of metabolic health is what you take in and what comes out on the other side. And the cool thing about metabolic health really as a physician, you learn about it all in basic biochemistry and biology. And if we just apply the basic principles that we all learned as a physician, instead of looking at the guidelines proposed decades later by somebody who said, do this, if this, do this, if this, do this. But if you apply the principles of clinical acumen and knowledge to how humans behave, what we're meant to do, what makes up basic cell structure, how our cell biology functions, then metabolic health makes sense. If you eat truly metabolically, it makes sense. And I feel that Revero is answering that question, and I want to make an impact. I'm in a small place and I want to make an impact on a bigger scale.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, no, I think it is. You make the point that it is something we can scale to hopefully huge effect, and I think we will. We're on the path for that certainly, and it's obviously it takes patients that are willing to say, "Hey, I want to pursue something different," but it also takes obviously providers and physicians to say, "Hey, look, this is something that I believe in as well." And like I said, it's almost everyone that works for us or works with us has had a personal relationship with nutrition and metabolic health. And I think that's really critical because you got to be able to walk the walk in many ways. When you said you went from doing a naturopath and midwifery and those types of things to, and it's interesting because my background comes from orthopedics. And I found when I was training, this is as far back as in the 1980s, that the folks that were practicing primary care were generally frustrated. It seemed like they were just angry that their patients weren't getting better or their patients weren't compliant with the medications for whatever reason that might be, maybe because they're getting side effects and they just didn't want to take it. And it was just, I didn't want to be part of that. So I thought I could go into surgery and just avoid all that because I can just, somebody breaks their leg, I can just put a metal plate or a metal rod down there and be done with it. And to some effect, that's what happened. But the reality was it set on me that about 80% of what I was seeing was just people with chronic metabolic disease showing up as arthritis or tendonitis or carpal tunnel syndrome or something along those lines. And then when that finally dawned upon me, I realized that, hey, actually primary care is a pretty good place to be because now you can really impact things. And I think that's really, really neat specialty. And if I were to do it again, I probably would have went into more primary care because this is really where you can make an impact if you have the right tools. The problem is the primary care physician is given with a cornucopia of drugs they can treat things with and not any real support in the lifestyle aspect. And I think that's an important aspect of it. As somebody who's now practicing with us, how valuable do you think it is to have that extra support layer with coaching and data and tech and patient education? Does that make a difference for you?
I think that is extremely important because part of what I do in my practice is I am that person, I am that coach. I feel that is instrumental to being successful because part of where people fall in the cracks, even if let's just play the devil's advocate and say, hey, primary care really works and that medication really works for you. But if you only see somebody once every few months to once a year, you really don't understand where that person is. And a lot of things can change. A lot of what the coaching does is it's in real time and somebody can troubleshoot in real time. And somebody, if they fall off the wagon and they had a party or they had a stressful event, they have that coach right there for them. And they can go right back and go back into whatever their original nutrition plan, whatever their goals are, or maybe some things are not working and they need to change course and they change direction, or maybe the medications are not working and they need to be deprescribed or to have more or have less. Having that constant interaction is really what makes the most difference. Even though people can do a lot of the work on themselves, and a lot of people have done, but I don't think that's the goal. I don't think the goal of the medical system is to say, hey, do everything on your own. I think that if we were to do primary care the right way, and that's the reason why I started this practice, is to have that continuous and constant relationship. If we think back to decades past to like an old-fashioned primary care doc, that's the doc that knew the whole family that you could call right away. And those docs, if we talk about rural docs and remote areas that didn't have a lot of resources, that's the doc that would sometimes give you exercise as a prescription, or eat this, don't eat that, or try more of this, not try that. We lost that. And I think Revero has a niche because it's answering that. And a lot of people who are interested in Revero that I speak with, they're interested because they're looking for that. They're looking for that accountability, for that personal relation, but they're also looking for something different. They know whatever it is, whether they had a lot of interaction or not with the standard system, it's not working for them.
Yeah, I wonder, as like an old-timey rural doc, you probably be asked to take care of pets and stuff like that. Some occasion I can see where that happens, where it's just, hey, what has been, I guess, eye-opening to you since you went down this path of nutrition, metabolic health, that, because me, I saw things that I never would have thought nutrition could impact. Even as an orthopedic surgeon, people, you come into me and say, hey, look, when I eat bread, my knees hurt. And I really I dismiss that as nonsense, but it really turns out that really does make a difference. So what kind of things have you seen that surprised you?
What really became interesting, so as a naturopath, you learn about nutrition as the base of everything and you learn about gut health. But it's interesting because we, as a naturopathic physician, would say, we'll test your sensitivities, eliminate everything you're not sensitive to, then you're eating extremely limited diet. And you're eating diet mostly, usually plant-based, eating a very limited plant-based diet. People can't stay in long-term. And then you take a boatload of supplements to fix the things. And they do work for a short term. The crazy thing about high protein diets and ketogenic diets and high protein ketogenic diets is they work long term and have long lasting results. And things that I saw with that is not just, hey, it's a short term fix. What I find with it that I find so amazing is that it really focuses not only on the temporizing solution, like, hey, my knees hurt if I eat bread, don't eat bread, your knees don't hurt. It's more like you can stay on a high protein, ketogenic, low carb diet for a while, and then you can rebuild the things that are broken. And then before you know it, you could eat some bread here and there, and then your knees don't hurt. And it's different for everybody, but that rebuilding aspect I've only found really, truly with an animal-based diet. And if you think about human beings and evolution of humanity, we've been eating a largely animal-based diet for as long as we have been humans until the last 50 years. And it's fascinating to speak about the system. And what I've seen is within a kind of a routine system analysis, we say, hey, people are not getting better. Like I was a hospitalist and I've seen people come in over and over again for the same cardiac problem. And the whole thing was people are not compliant, people are not taking the medication, people are still eating a lot of meat, people are still eating a lot of saturated fat. But statistically, that's not true. Because most of the people that I've kept readmitting to the hospital have been taking all their medications faithfully, have been on a very strict meat-free diet. And statistically, we've, as a population, especially as an American population, we've been statistically per capita, we're eating less meat now than we ever have. And
yeah, we're eating less beef for sure.
We're eating less beef, we're eating more chicken. But overall, what I've seen is the longevity and how the longer people stay on the metabolic pathway and have this high protein diet, high animal-based diet, the better they get. And then I haven't seen that with anything. I haven't seen that with plant-based diet. I haven't seen it with the blood type diet. I haven't seen anything else. And I also feel that you can apply the principles to fit every lifestyle. Like somebody can be extremely carnivore, somebody can be carnivore keto, some can be paleo carnivore, but it really can cater to people's lifestyles and what people's goals are, where you can't really do that in any different way.
Yeah, you're up in Montana where there's a lot of cattle, as you probably are very familiar living up there. And I would imagine some of your clients are probably cattle ranchers or something like that, I would imagine. So they have to, and it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of cattlemen's groups over the years, and it's almost surprising to them when you tell them that meat is really healthy for them. Because they've even bought into I would call it a little bit of the propaganda that's come out there, and it's interesting to see.
Fascinating. It's fascinating because people don't eat what's outside their door.
Yeah, it's quite strange to see that. And you are right that right now in the U.S., we're like 70%, 75% of our diet is plant-based. And a lot of it's ultra-processed garbage, which makes it even worse. But we don't eat very much in the way of animal foods. And if we just look at meat itself, it's something like 10, 15% of our diet. It's a tiny amount. When you said historically, it might have represented a much higher percentage. And I think that's clearly true. Today's a pretty interesting day because it's election day here in the U.S. And I was watching yesterday, they had Elon Musk talking to Joe Rogan. And the first 5 minutes of that podcast, or 10 minutes of the podcast, he talks about he's eating steak and eggs for breakfast and he feels so much better. And he's talking about the benefits of carnitine, which are found primarily almost exclusively in meat. And that this thought about cow flatulence destroying the atmosphere is complete nonsense. There's no evidence of that. And obviously, I've been talking about this for the better part of a decade. So it's nice to see that a lot of people are realizing this and it's becoming more mainstream in that thought. I guess you said you were in the Caribbean and then, of course, in Alaska. What brought you to Alaska initially because it's cold up there.
It's cold up there. I want to do rural family medicine. It's the best place to be trained. So if you want, I had a goal, and that was the best way to achieve my goal. Out of the fact that Alaska is gorgeous, and I fell in love with it the moment I stepped off the plane. I felt like that was home, and I loved it every moment I lived there. But it's also the only place where I could be trained as a rural family doc. And I worked alone in Nome and Savunga, and I went to Bethel and other remote areas. So it was just a great opportunity to be trained as a physician. So if you want to be the best, which is what I wanted, that was the place to be trained.
Very interesting. Yeah. And then Montana was obviously, it's another kind of rural. I mean,
Montana was a family compromise. It didn't take a day to get out of Montana like it takes a day to get out of Alaska. And it was a bigger place. Everybody laughed at me when I said I moved to a bigger place of Missoula, Montana, because I moved from Alaska and New Zealand. But it was on a road system. Before that, I worked in Juneau, which was not on the road system. And you could get really closed in on a really dark day. So it was a good compromise for the family. It was a good place to raise the kids, but I was only willing to move so far from bears and the mountains. So Montana was like the closest you can come.
Yeah, Montana, it's certainly a beautiful state. I've not been to Alaska. It would be nice to see. But as far as, let me talk to you about this topic because this comes up all the time. A lot of people have reservations about eating more meat in general or certainly going on an animal-based or even a carnivore diet. One of the big fears is around things like cardiovascular disease, cholesterol, and so on and so forth. How do you approach that with patients?
So the interesting thing is, which I think this is a great time for this because there is all this research now being done. So for a longest time, people who were eating these low-carb lifestyle were unique individuals and very little research and information was available out there. Because this is gaining in popularity and people asking about, there's a lot more research about this than we know. So I not only can talk about it in theory, I can also bring receipts. There is a lot of research that used to be done, but it was just maybe not as widely available. But now it's becoming more. And now there's Cholesterol Co. Dave Feldman putting out a lot of research, a recent CCTA study that showed lack of inflammation in ketogenic diets that you can see in real time. So a lot of times we can now understand, he come up with the lipid energy model. So I'm an academic, right? I'm an academic. I've done a lot of medical school. So for me, the way I talk to my clients is I talk about really all the information that's out there. I have a collection of articles and information that I'm putting together specific for that purpose to build a kind of a repository or a library to bring support to what I'm saying. All the books, all the information, everything is out there. So there is a lot of interesting things. And I also feel like a guy by Gary Tobes, he talks a lot about the quality of nutritional research. And I think that is really interesting because this move towards nutrition and metabolic health and carnivore diets, I feel will positively affect the quality of the research that is going to be put out there. Because for the longest time, and I use that example all the time, but multiple cardiovascular and meat studies were done. They take one group from a 7-day Adventist, Loma Linda, and they take somebody who doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, has a really close-knit community, but it also happens to be vegetarian, but they also do yoga 3 times a week and practice and have really close-knit family. And then they take somebody who is much more isolated and goes to Burger King on a regular basis, has a burger and fries and a milkshake, and maybe smokes on the side and drinks beer regularly. And they say it must be the meat. So the meat is really unhealthy for you. It's saturated fat that brought that person who goes to Burger King to the emergency room. And those people in Loma Linda who are only eating vegetables, that's really what it is. But really, some intelligent person told me it's really fascinating that human beings are, even though we function on core principles, we're distinct individuals and we have these differences. But in science, we decided to put all these variables together and just decide to use it as a scientific method as we do for physics and chemistry, and it doesn't really work. We also try to do too many things at once, and we really have to do really good research if you want to prove it, and have to really look at each factor is really different. If you want to study vegetarian diet against a meat diet, we have to do apples for apples. If you're eating organic fruit from the trees, then you have to eat grass-fed organic raised beef in equal portions. My other criticism in a lot of the research studies, and that's why it's really important to really look at it, is look at, this is my last thing that I really want to address more recently, is studies that demonize high protein. In order to run the research study, in order to have the exact amount of protein, they'll take it in a protein shake or a protein mix or a supplemental feed, like almost like a tube feed. And then you have somebody else who's doing like a salad or vegetables. And they say, hey, high protein is really bad. Vegetables are really good. But I think it's really important to distinguish if you're getting your protein from a processed factory derived mix, or are you getting it from a healthy cow that was butchered? And I think that is really important to distinguish in the research as well. And I talk like that to everybody about it. It's not just the protein, and you talk about it in your book. It's not just the protein, it's the bioavailability of the protein. It's how our body was programmed to receive it. It's what kind of food you're eating. If you're eating a whole food diet that's high protein based and based on high meat intake from an animal, you're not eating it from mixes and shakes and protein bars and whatever else that on paper seems like a good idea. That is, I think, is key. And I think we have to conduct our research this way. And I think this movement is really promising to create better research. And I think once we create better research, we're going to see very different outcomes.
Yeah, I know, like, I'm excited that this year we're finally making some progress and getting a lot of the research out there, which is, I think, we need to do that for sure. Let me ask you just a funny a question. What do you eat? What's your normal diet like? What do you eat daily, or how's that go?
What, we just bought another freezer.
Not for tofu then. You didn't buy a tofu freezer, did you?
I've never touched, even, I used to be vegetarian. That's the dark secret. I used to be vegetarian for many years. And I think that was one of the most unhealthiest things I ever done to myself. But my family is extremely lucky. I'm very privileged because my husband harvests a bison every year. And I've just got a grass-fed, grass-finished cow. And there is a farmer that I know personally who raises grass-fed, free-range pigs, which is extremely unusual to do. And they're Mangalisa pork, which are Hungarian heritage pigs of the best. And I get one in the spring and one in the summer, and one in the spring, one in the fall. And then I keep hoping that my boys will go and actually bring me back an animal for all the time they spend in the hills, but that will happen eventually. And my family hunts. If there is some wild game that's going to be added, we eat primarily meat. I have kids, and my kids eat this way. And I have to say that to see my kids grow up eating this way, and we've been doing that. We've been on this journey for a number of years, so this is not something that's new for us. But to see my kids being primarily fed, they don't eat grain, they're primarily fed on Montana beef and North Dakota bison. And to see them not only be strong and virile and full of energy, but also to see their emotional health and their mental health be above their peers. And it's the only difference is the food. And it's incredible. And I've applied it to my clients in my practice, and I see the same results from all kids of all ages. It's not just adults. And it's incredible to see. And that is, I guess that is a huge part of the reason why I want to be part of Revero and another company that can scale this. And I think Revero has the right idea. Bring this out into the open, publicize this, and push it, because when I think about eating this way, is we're building a legacy for the future generations. If we think of what legacy has come out over the last out of processed food industry and other industries, this is a way to rebuild and refocus our legacy. Because if I think of what I'm doing for my kids, and I spend time and energy to procure really whole foods and to buy really farm products and to make everything that I make at home. We cook at home every day. And for us, that's the legacy that we bring to our kids so they can bring it to their families and the families that come after. And I think that, to me, is more important than soccer club, than gymnastics club, than everything else. I feel that I would rather sacrifice some activities or some sport events so we can have dinner at home and the kids can eat this type of food.
One of the things you mentioned in that statement there was that you talk about the mental health of your kids. And I agree 100% that I think that nutrition impacts mental health. And I think that's something that there are so many kids that are suffering from, a lot of mental health issues, whether it's autism or ADHD or gender dysphoria or depression or suicidality or all that stuff. And I think much of that could be helped with nutrition. How much do you see when you take care of patients and you put them on a more appropriate diet? Does their mental health have an impact on that?
It's huge, but it's usually a big surprise. I try to leave it out to the end until you talk about energy, you talk about gut health, you talk about stability. But it's fascinating when people come in and say that overlaying anxiety that I've always had, it's gone. And that is across board. And it's incredible because definitely I see a very captive audience, right? People who will come to my practice and the people who are willing to do it through food don't really necessarily want a medication. But it's amazing to see that across board because people say, hey, and usually it's not an immediate result. Usually immediately they'll see increased energy, increased gut health, better digestion. I don't have gas like I used to have. And then they're like, and you know what? My anxiety is gone. And I do feel that if we were to feed our population in a different way, all this diagnosis of anxiety and depression and rising, like that anxiousness that we have, all of that, we probably could make it, most of it, go away.
Yeah, let me ask you, because you said you came from initially, before you went to medical school and got your degree for family medicine, you did naturopathic stuff. Does the naturopathic sort of belief system, is it mostly like a plant-based system, or how is that taught?
It is. It really doesn't seem to be, but it is. It really is more fish and plant-based. And I think the reason we don't see across board, that's because the ideas are there. The ideas are that we look to the underlying root cause. We want to regulate your body system rather than treat the symptoms. The ideas are there. The approach, though, I think is limiting us as a naturopathic physician. And I also feel a lot of naturopathic medicine is we're as good as or better than a regular doctor. So you say, don't take this pill, take this herb. Don't take this, take these supplements. And I was frustrated with the continuous piling on of supplements and herbs where I really felt that could be done nutritiously. But the dirty secret is the nutrition has to come from animals.
Yeah, I just don't believe we need a gazillion supplements to be able to not only survive, but thrive as humans. It just doesn't make sense at all. And so I think we found out what the problem was. We've been pushing the wrong diet for so many years, and then we have to supplement it because it's not a very good diet. Do you get I don't know how long you've been practicing this way, obviously with Revero for a relatively new time, but have you had a lot of pushback from colleagues, or because you've been maybe by yourself and maybe not having to deal with that? Or obviously as a hospitalist, you've got cardiologists and nephrologists and all the different specialties. How has that been received? Have you discussed your kind of thoughts before?
So I haven't had really frank pushback. I'm a well-respected physician in the area, but I haven't gotten really wide open arm acceptance either, if that makes sense. People know that I have a more functional, integrative, whatever, insert the blank here approach. I just call it good medicine. I'm not really in any boxes. I just do good medicine. I'm a good physician. What I found, interestingly, is definitely a very small community. What I found within our community is that it's not acceptance, but it's not really wide open welcome either. It's just like you do you on the side, and we'll just maybe pass by.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. And I guess here's the other question, because if you're just in a general practice, there's a lot of people that they don't want to change their lifestyle. They're just like, just give me a pill, doc, and going away. How do you deal with those patients? I remember when I had patients that they just wanted me to give them a shot in their knee because their knee hurt. And I would start talking about, hey, it'd be helpful if you clean up your diet and got out and exercise, and it ultimately would help you. And some got very upset that I wasn't just going to automatically give them a shot. So how do you deal with that?
So it's a little bit of an unfair question right now because I have a concierge practice, and that's what I designed it. And it's a membership-based practice, so people have to pay. And this creates somewhat of a barrier to somebody who doesn't want to do anything, because people who are really interested and invested in their health, people who made good decisions throughout their whole life and are making other decisions that are also valuable to them because they want to invest in their health. They see it as a valuable investment. And because they're already ready to invest in their health, they're ready to make changes. Some more reluctantly than others, but none of them are completely closed to it. And none of them are looking for an easy way out because they already at the onset, they have met me before they signed up. They know what this is about. I'm very open with what I do. And they're there for a reason. They're there because they want this result. But I do have some more recalcitrant patients. And it's interesting that I've tried to rope all my friends. This is very common. Hey, you're sitting on this great gift, right? And you just want to share it with everybody. So I try to rope in all my friends and all my neighbors and all my family members and my remote family members and family members I have barely seen. You're just trying to rope everybody in. Hey, I have this great idea. I have this great practice. I have the most advanced diagnostics. I have this different approach. Why don't we all try it? And that has been almost heartbreakingly disappointing, that I have people who say, no, you know what, I would rather have a surgery. And you're familiar with that being an orthopedic surgeon, right? If you come up to somebody and say, hey, maybe you can postpone that joint replacement and try this. And they say, no, I already made my decision. It's going to be too hard. I was like, it's hard to recover from a joint replacement, but they won't. And that has been probably more disappointing, because it's almost like the opposite. Like my clients, because they're my clients, they're all willing to do it on different scales, different goals, different ideas. But then it's the people that you want to rope in because you know them and you think, hey, I can really help you. They're reluctant.
Yeah. And it's, you mentioned with Revero, our patients basically, they get screened, and if they're not willing to make a lifestyle change, then we're not going to be able to help them. So you're going to present, and I can tell. Let me ask you from a physician's standpoint, and I, maybe compared to being a hospitalist, where you don't have that really relationship, you don't have the support, you don't really get to change things. How much more satisfying is it working as a physician in this sort of situation where you have supportive coaches and a program that allows you to work on metabolic health versus, say, a standard model where you might just be seeing 30, 40 patients a day and just dispensing drugs all day long? How much
that's
more
an unfair comparison. Then, hey, would you like to go vacation in Hawaii on the beach, or would you like to go work in a coal mine? It's light years, right? Years. And the way I would say it is, at the end, you can have I can have a very busy day at the clinic and the office and bring my work home. I will be less tired and less exhausted and less drained than a day at the hospital, because at the hospital, it's just people are so sick and people are getting sicker and sicker, and you feel that you're just against a wall, really. But here you can make really long lasting change. And I feel that the change you can make with metabolic focus care is that change you can make for generations, because even though I may have only one member of the family, they'll bring that home. Because I'm not giving them a pill that only the person can use. I'm giving them concrete tools with which they can improve their lifestyle and their health forever.
When you were practicing as a hospitalist, how many of those patients do you think would have benefited, could have avoided much of that had they adopted a preventive metabolic health? Yeah, probably.
All of them.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's
all
amazing.
of them. And some of them have become my clients, but all of them. And I feel like, because I started digging into metabolic health before I even opened my practice, and then here and there I would interject. And then when I felt like somebody would be open to it, I would talk to them about food in relation to health. And there would be all these people in the hospital who would be like, yeah, I'll do it. I want to do it. And I would give them more information and resources to look at. So I was hoping that you plant a seed and maybe the tree will grow, and maybe I made some difference in somebody else's life. You can see some people so sick and so destroyed by this sequence of events that probably are metabolic based. And I feel that I could have made maybe more of an impact looking back on my career as a physician, but I know that I'm making even more of an impact right now.
Yeah, just to you said when you went to medical school, how much time in medical school is devoted to metabolic health and nutrition? I know I'm asking this kind of jokingly, but just
yes, 0. Zero?
Zero, basically.
Zero.
So, yeah, so you don't learn this stuff in medical school.
You
It's
don't
kind of
learn
like,
this in medical school. Yeah. You don't learn
yeah,
this in medical school. You don't get this instruction. But it's really fascinating because you spend 2 years memorizing the Krebs cycle and biochemical pathways. And then you get into clinicals, and then they're like,
yeah.
promptly forget, you know what? You're not going to use any of that. Don't worry about it. Here's some protocols. But then now I'm like, I got to get that biochemistry textbook and refresh my mind on the Krebs cycle, because that's really what drives us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I learned the Krebs cycle like 5 different times through my college and medical school career, and different organic chemistry and biology, and all the different times we talk about the Krebs cycle. And you don't really, in clinical practice routinely, you don't even think about it. But now you're like, yeah, metabolism is important. What was I going to ask you? Oh, deprescription of drugs. How often are you able to get people off medications now?
All the time.
That's interesting, isn't it?
And it's fascinating. It's just however much that people are willing to put in, right? If somebody is really aggressively going after it, they'll get there. So that's the really interesting thing, is that if somebody's, yeah, I'm okay the way it is, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that, then maybe that's where you are. Everybody has their own journey, and everybody's at a different place, and I'm there to support them however it is. My goals from my patients are not their goals. I have to respect their goals. But if somebody comes in and they're like, I want to be off of them, there's a way to do it. You just have to be willing to do it. And if they're willing to do it, they'll get off of them.
Yeah, and I think it's important to put out there that some drugs have to be tapered carefully.
Yes.
Some people with certain conditions need to know that they're going to have to come off their drugs, because you can see, like particularly diabetics, when they stop eating as much carbohydrates, their blood glucose can fall down to fairly problematic levels. Hypertensives can become hypotensive. So
Yeah.
How important is it for a person on medications to have somebody overseeing that?
That's critical. And I think that's a fault of the medical system, the mainstream medical system, that we're not supportive of more an alternative hypothesis or these meat-based diets, because even though they're gaining popularity, they're definitely not getting renowned from the medical system as we are. I'm hoping that will change. I'm hoping that I will play a small role in that changing, because the whole organic movement 10 years ago was virtually non-existent, and now everybody knows what organic food is. We can have a separate argument whether that's needed or not. Maybe we just need to revise how we farm in general. But I think the issue is that really having a physician in your corner is instrumental. And part of the reason I wanted to have a more limited patient panel type of practice is that I can be that physician in somebody's corner. People have access to me at all times. We have a cell phone. They can just call directly. They can text me directly. They can text to anybody. And that allows really direct communication, because if something comes up, if you're eating a low carbohydrate diet, it's very likely you can become dehydrated. You can become hypotensive if you're taking a diuretic, if you're taking a water pill, if you're taking a blood pressure pill, you can become. And if you want to stop the medications, the way I look at it is, first, you want to eliminate the need for the medications before you stop them. And that's how I approach it too. It's not, hey, I want to stop all medications, I'm going to stop them. No, you want to eliminate the need for them. And that's why that's why there is such a thing as deprescribing. That's why there is such thing as physician oversight.
Yeah, you're obviously in Montana. You're working through us with Revero as well, but you're licensed in, I think, 5 or 6 different states. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Yeah. Oh, you're in 8 states. What states are you licensed in, just out of curiosity?
Alaska, let me give you a list. Alaska, Colorado, Florida, Washington, Montana, Massachusetts, Michigan. What am I forgetting?
Arkansas, maybe. No, not Alaska. No, you're not Arkansas. AK.
Alaska, Colorado.
Are you in Maine, maybe, or no?
No, Massachusetts and Michigan.
Michigan, okay.
Mostly because I have some remote clients. And for them, I became licensed in different states. And the remote clients just came through referrals, and primarily because of metabolic health, right? Obviously, I'm not doing urgent remote care for them, but they wanted that attention. They want that doctor in their pocket, the advocate, the support, and somebody they wanted a coach and a physician, everything at once.
One of the things and I think it's really that notion of support, because a lot of people will attempt to do a low carb diet or a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet on their own, and some will have success, some won't. But one of the things I found, and I did a survey a few years ago on 12,000 people doing diet. And I asked them how much support they had, whether it be physician or friends and families, employers, and so on and so forth. And the ones that had a lot of support actually had better outcomes, about 30% improvements in outcomes versus the ones that don't have the support. So it's important to have a supportive healthcare team or supportive physician in your corner. So as we expand the state coverage in Revero, the people that might have an interest in having you as a physician through the Revero program, there's at least those 8 states that potentially you'll be participating in. So that's pretty cool because I'm excited to see I was just talking to a fellow yesterday who's an attorney that works for disability care, long-term disability. And he wants to see if we can do some stuff because a lot of his clients, that's a lot of money that's being spent on something where things that we could probably get people back to work, quite honestly, if we fix them correctly. Yes. So there may be some sort of big things happening in the near future. So it'll be exciting to have coverage in all 50 states as we'll be there fairly soon, I suspect. And that's really great. What do you do for fun? I know we've been talking about work the whole time. What do you do for fun out there?
Mostly, like, my interests have changed. I used to be a big time runner and I still like fitness. And even though I had a big dip more recently, probably because I opened a practice and I started working all the time. But I'm really interested in fitness and outdoor stuff. But I've really more recently, and a lot of it's because of metabolic health, have become really interested in farming. So that's really the goal, is to farm. So I have a huge interest in farming and I'm getting my kids into it. We're starting small. Where the gateway drug to farming is chickens. So that's all we have chickens. But I'm trying to pass all the responsibility to my kids. So right now my kid takes care of the chickens. But the interest is farming, and I've really dug deep into, I'm a nerd. So I've really dug deep into soil regeneration and keeping the water on the land using old-fashioned technology mixed with modern technology. And there's fascinating, just scratch the surface, and there's so much out there. So that's become a huge focus and study of mine, not just regenerative farming, but regenerative soil management, organic agriculture, in a way that it's actually metabolic health for the soil, really. It's really all about it. Is the soil is treated in the same way we treat the human body. There's this great, amazing, I'll put a plug in for him. His name is John Kempf, and he does agriculture. He's an Amish guy who's started this whole movement into regenerative agriculture from that perspective. And he says that as you grow fruit and vegetables he's more of an agriculture person, but if you grow fruit and vegetables from a well-tilled soil, as you pick the fruit and vegetables, the soil will be richer rather than poor. We're just so used to taking, and that's the same thing as metabolic principles. If you eat a carnivore style, high protein, ketogenic type diet, your body will get stronger and stronger with time and be able to rebuild itself. And it's the same with the soil. You can do the same with the soil. If you take care of the soil in the right way, a lot of it with mixed animal farming, that's the old-fashioned way. If you do it in the right way, you're with the seasons, as you till the soil more, actually you don't till at all. But as you actually put more cows on the land, your soil will improve with time.
Yeah, that's something that's the whole point of the regenerative sort of philosophy. How old are your kids, by the way? They're out chasing chickens around.
10 and 5.
Oh, okay. That's a good age for them to participate.
So, and a lot of fun. They're at the age where a lot of what I do is around them, right? They do sports and they're active and they do 4-H and they do all the things. They do all the things and I do all the things with them, and try to learn how to make cheese, which have not yet been successful.
I know somebody said yogurt was quite easy to make. I've never done that.
I don't know. The one time I tried, I was not successful, but I'm going to try again. You have some great recipes.
I don't know if I have any, but that's what somebody's told me. Yogurt was quite easy to make.
Yeah, I'm going to try yogurt, and I'm in the kefir is probably you're supposed to start, but you're supposed to. I got this. I'm a purist, and I got this book about cheese making from a guy who's also a purist, and he talks about cheese making in the really true ancestral way. So you can't just get any grains for making kefir and yogurt. So that's where I am right now. I'll have to do it the right way, because you have to do it the right way, because you don't want to add processed or pre-made ingredients to your food. So
yeah, I guess there's something more. So I can imagine there's very something satisfying when you grow your own food or harvest your own animals or something like that. Have your own chickens and have your own eggs. That's got to be fun. My wife is terrified of chickens. She doesn't like them, so she's no good. She's put the big veto on that one. But she doesn't mind cows. So one day, if I ever
You're going to get a
if
cow.
I could ever retire, maybe I'll get a couple cows and just
But
feel
it's
safe that
also
I
you
got some
have
cows
full
around me.
control, right? You have full
Yeah.
control what you're eating, and you know what the animals ate, and you know what you're putting in your body. I think there's some beauty to that, and there's some reward to that.
Yeah, for sure. That is. And a connection, what it means to eat. Because a lot of people are just plugged into the green and blue and brightly colored. It's not even food in many ways. And Dr. Petersen, Camilla, it's been wonderful chatting with you. Thank you first of all, thanks for being part of Revero. I think it's awesome that we've got so many great providers that can help people out. But thanks for taking the time out. I know you got a busy day.
You.
I like I guess it's an elk behind you or something. I'm looking at that. It's a moose. Never mind. Oh, I didn't see his face. Yeah, moose.
Yeah, I have all the Montana animals on my walls. So.
Okay, because there's a lot of. Is there moose up in Alaska too? I think isn't there?
Yes. There's a lot of moose in Alaska.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
There's only Anchorage has a moose that walked into our emergency room once.
Was he sick?
No, he just had the doors automatic, and then they had to disable the automatic doors because the moose
came in. Well, maybe he was just checking it out. Anyway, that's awesome. Thanks a bunch. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful day, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. All right.
Talk soon.
All right. Take care, everybody.